You're watching Euronews Now with me, Takumbo Silako. Let's start by looking at our top stories. There have been violent clashes in Belgium, Austria and the Netherlands as several EU states reintroduced COVID restrictions. A Christmas parade in the US state of Wisconsin ends in tragedy after a car plows into the crowd. And Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai holds a video call with Olympic officials, but supporters say they want more evidence that she's safe.
Austria is the latest country to enter in a fourth lockdown since the start of the pandemic. The country's low vaccination rate has led to record after record in the number of infections. Vienna will make vaccinations mandatory in 2022. The new restrictions will remain in place until the 13th of December at the latest. The Christmas period will be interrupted for several weeks and many Austrians used its last day of normality. Many are just resigned, but for business owners it's a big hit.
We're not in a good mood. We had these 6 weeks already in our plans. The work here has been great fun so far. Nobody thought there would be a lockdown for the Christmas markets. It's a bit sad for us and shocking, so we're not happy.
In several cities, including Salzburg and Linz, protesters gathered to reject a new lockdown and the vaccination decree. In Brussels, peaceful protests against the new COVID rules decided by the government soon turned to violent clashes. Police used tear gas to restore order. Belgium will make teleworking mandatory most of the week and will broaden the use of the face masks after the number of new COVID cases has reached worrying levels. The Czech Republic will also apply stricter rules, especially with the unvaccinated population. Negative coronavirus tests will not be recognized as COVID certificate to go to a hairdresser or a restaurant. Companies must also test unvaccinated workers on a weekly basis from Monday. Germany had already imposed stricter measures, closures of some public places, more control over the non-vaccinated. Now the German authorities are debating, due to the low inoculation rate, whether to make the vaccine mandatory.
Austrian teachers and parents are quite confused about the new hard lockdown measures which come into effect today in Austria. While most non-essential shops remain closed, as well as theaters and bars and restaurants, schools remain open. But the Austrian government urges parents to keep their children at home and safe, because school children have among the highest 7-day incidence rates in Austria. But parents are not just worried about their children's education, but also about the mandatory vaccination which has been introduced in Austria, or will be introduced before 1st of February. A lot of protesters have hit the streets on Saturday in Vienna, between 40 and 100,000, but also yesterday on Sunday in Linz there were thousands of protesters, and many of them against a mandatory vaccine, especially for the children. But it is likely that the European Medicines Agency will approve, for example, the Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine also for children starting age 5. So it is possible that the mandatory vaccine will apply also to them in Austria. Johannes Blechberger, Euronews, Millstätter See, Austria.
Well, let's get a little more now on those protests in the Netherlands over the country's reimposition of COVID-19 rules and restrictions. Our reporter Fernand van Tets is in Amsterdam for us. Fernand, good to see you there. There have been lots of violence, of course, over the weekend in several towns, The Hague and Rotterdam, whose mayor described the events as an orgy of violence. Why are so many people so angry?
So this is the first full weekend of this partial lockdown measures coming into force. That means bars and restaurants have to close at 8 p.m. and also that sports events are not allowed to have any spectators. So in Rotterdam, for example, it seems that supporters of the football club Feyenoord were a big player in those protests, and that has also coincided with the announcement last week that there will be no fireworks allowed to be set off on New Year's Eve. Now, that is a huge tradition here in the Netherlands, but the government has said due to the rising number of COVID cases, they don't want the additional pressure on hospitals that any victims could cause. So those two things really coinciding with basically mostly peaceful protests escalating, with protesters then using those heavy fireworks, which are going to be banned, against the police.
So, Fernand, what's been the government's response to this? Are they going to increase their efforts to try and convince people that these restrictions and rules are the right way to do things, or are they just determined to just coerce people, as it were, or some people are claiming?
So the Justice Minister has been very clear that this is criminal behavior that has nothing to do with demonstrating, and over 100 people have been arrested over the past few days. And if you look at the rhetoric the government has been employing, it's very much a focus on the people that are not vaccinated should get a shot in order to protect everybody. And one of the ways they're trying to increase pressure is by introducing 2G measures, which means only those people that are vaccinated or recently recovered can partake in public life. A legislative amendment is actually being introduced to that effect today. And although a slim majority of the Dutch population has been polled and says it is supportive of those measures, it's unclear if that will actually get through the House. Now, meanwhile, cases here continue to rise, close to 20,000 infections a day, and the number of people in intensive care units still rising. And so actually we're hearing talk now of more serious measures being imposed, perhaps a longer lockdown, including the closure of schools, and that could last all through the winter.
At least 5 people are dead and more than 40 injured after a car ploughed into a Christmas parade in the US state of Wisconsin. The incident took place in the town of Waukesha on Sunday afternoon as crowds watched the annual holiday event. Police Chief Dan Thompson told reporters that a person of interest was in custody and a car has been recovered.
An officer did discharge his weapon at the suspect vehicle to try to stop the vehicle. No bystanders were injured as a result of the weapon discharge. The officer involved has been with the department for 6.5 years.
Thompson also said there are no other threats, but schools in the area will be closed on Monday. Roads will remain closed while the investigation continues.
Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai has told the International Olympic Committee she's safe and well, nearly 3 weeks after she made sexual assault allegations against a senior Chinese minister, then disappeared from public view. The IOC's president, Thomas Bach, said they spoke on Sunday, and Peng told him she was at home in Beijing but wanted her privacy respected for the moment. Chinese state media has released several videos of the tennis star appearing at a tournament in the country's capital and at a restaurant in the city. But her supporters abroad, including the Women's Tennis Association, had said they feared she was being coerced. Peng had alleged she was forced into sexual relations with the former Chinese Vice Premier Zhang Gaoli, but her post was removed from social media within minutes.
There have been violent clashes in Belgium, Austria and the Netherlands as several EU states reintroduced COVID restrictions. Christmas parade in the US state of Wisconsin ends in tragedy after a car plows into the crowd. And Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai holds a video call with Olympic officials, but supporters say they want more evidence that she's safe. While fighting has stopped in most of Syria, the province of Idlib is still under heavy shelling by Russian and Syrian forces. But for residents, especially children, unexploded bombs that litter the area can pose as great a threat as the ongoing attacks. Euronews reporters Yusuf Garibi and Heba Shehade sent us this report from the town of Tawama.
An unexploded bomb changed the life of the Rahal family. The kids were playing with it when it suddenly started emitting smoke. Mahmoud was not home when the explosion happened, but he got the call to head towards the hospital.
I went to the hospital and no one told me anything. They said nothing happened to your kids, don't be scared, and then...
Reem flew for 10 metres and I flew for 5.
Mariam and Reem went through 16 operations to save their lives, while their brothers, Mustafa, aged 12, and Yasin, 2, died.
Then I saw them, they were put in 2 boxes. I asked, are those my children? They said, yes, I can't go on anymore.
Then I called you. I called Dad.
There's almost no area in northwest Syria clear of unexploded ordnance. 4.1 million people in the region face daily bombardment by the Syrian regime and its ally Russia. Civil defense experts are frequently called out. They scan the area for explosives that can remain undiscovered for years, waiting to be activated.
These things make our work more complicated. Today we clear a space, then the regime bombs it again. As you can see, the bombardment is still going on, whether by the regime or Russian airstrikes. So after we cleanse the area, we come back again and find it contaminated again by that bombing. So far, the ammunition removal teams have got rid of around 22,766 pieces of ammunition of several kinds, mostly in clusters.
As they wait for an end to this seemingly endless war, civilians have no options but to keep an eye on the sky and another on the ground.
Ethiopian demonstrators protested outside the US Embassy in London to stop what they say is American support for the Tigray People's Liberation Front, a rebel group embroiled in a grueling year-long war with Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government forces. The London demonstration was one of many across the world, including one in Washington, D.C. Paris's main street was brought to life on Sunday as its Christmas lights were switched on. French pop star Clara Luciani switched on the lights at the Champs-Élysées, alongside Parisian Mayor Anne Hidalgo. The world-famous boulevard was packed with people who came to watch the event.
It doesn't need to be thrown away, we can still fix it. Phrases like these are often heard in this cafe in Copenhagen. 6 years ago, the cafe's manager began specialising in events where customers can bring in damaged electrical devices and have them repaired free of charge.
We have to take care of the planet. We can't afford to live like we used to live, so we have to make a movement about not throwing things out when it's still working.
However, it's not always that easy. Some devices are built in a way that makes them very difficult to open and repair. Sometimes it's even impossible to bring them back to life.
Whether it's glue in the product that makes it very difficult to take out a part and replace it, whether it's the use of proprietary tools, meaning you need to have specific tools that are linked to the manufacturer to open a product, or whether it's the fact that spare parts or repair information are very difficult to access.
The Dane is campaigning for a new policy to be introduced throughout the European Union. This set of guidelines will rate electrical devices on a scale of 0 to 10, according to their repairability. Such an index has already been in place in France since the beginning of the year.
Just days after the climate negotiations at the COP26 summit came to a close, Ukraine's president announced an ambitious reforestation project. Here in the north of the country, workers are putting tree seedlings into the ground in an attempt to counteract the effects of climate change.
Europe declared plans to plant 3 billion trees in 10 years. The whole of Europe planned 3 billion in 10 years, but our plan is planting 1 billion in 3 years.
But some scientists question how realistic this ambition is.
They must plant 10 trees a second or 200 seedlings in a second. So this is not possible technically. This is absolutely unrealistic in terms of space and timing planned by the president.
Experts say that approximately 16% of Ukraine's territory is covered by forest, but 3 to 4% more is needed to challenge climate change.
Manchester United's embattled manager Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has been fired after a string of poor results left the club in 7th place in the Premier League.
No. That's the short and simple answer, no.
The club said in a statement that Solskjaer would always be a legend and that it was with regret that management had reached what they called a difficult decision. It follows a run of poor form, including a 5-0 thrashing by regional rivals Liverpool last month and a 4-1 defeat by relative minnows Watford on Saturday. Speculation now turns to his successor, with the former Real Madrid manager Zinedine Zidane an early favourite for the role. The Frenchman is currently out of work, but he could be the right fit. An appointment by United would reunite him with the Portuguese international star Cristiano Ronaldo.
England's David Beckham and France's World Cup winner Marcel Desailly were among the stars to join the celebrations in Doha on Sunday to remind football fans they've got just 1 year to wait for the Qatar World Cup to begin.
Are you ready now?
A giant countdown clock was unveiled during the ceremony, also attended by FIFA President Gianni Infantino. The tournament planning has been overshadowed by reports of large numbers of deaths during the construction of the 8 stadia that will host the Games. Unproven claims of bribes being given during the awarding of the Games, and concerns over high temperatures, which mean the tournament will now take place in the middle of the European football season.
Alexander Zverev is the 2021 ATP Finals champion after defeating Daniil Medvedev in straight sets 6-4, 6-4 in Turin, Italy. A day after beating world number 1 Novak Djokovic in the semis, Zverev showed no signs of fatigue, putting in a dominant performance. Zverev controlled the tempo from the outset, imposing a strong service game. Medvedev tried to stay in the game, but his service was lacking and the world number 3 served out the victory with an ace. The title rounds off quite a year for Zverev, who also won a gold at the Tokyo Olympics and recorded his 59th victory on tour.
That's it for now, but do stay with us as we'll be bringing you all the latest from across Europe and beyond. You can also find out more on our website, euronews.com.